On the show, we have Mona Rutenberg. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this day. We have a very, very special guest. It's an old friend of mine. She's not that old, but an old friend of mine from Montreal from back in the 70s. And she's an amazing artist, Mona Rutenberg. Thank you for joining us this day, Mona.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Share with us very briefly your work, just a little bit about your work, and because I'm excited about it. Every time I see a new piece by you, or even, when I go to your website, I just love perusing. Share a little bit about yourself and where you're coming from.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoy my work. That makes me feel like I want to talk about it more. So, well, I come from a family where there's a lot of talented souls, and I think I had my hands busy even in my young years, in that I was given art materials, so painting, drawing materials, textiles, leather. Moving through years of some summer camp where I love to hang out in the arts and crafts. So you get a really nice introduction to all kinds of media. And I do recall at one point in one of the summer camps finding bits and pieces of soapstone and discovering that carving was very natural for me, and making three-dimensional objects was very natural for me. By the time I was in college, or in Quebec, we call it CEGEP, I was registered for Creative Arts program, a program where there were drawing classes and painting classes. There wasn't too much in sculpture, but by the time I finished that, knowing that I would study art education to go into art therapy, I took more courses in art and always gravitated to the sculpture program. But where things really pushed forward was having made a figurative piece that came to me in a dream. And by putting it together in clay, by making the sculpture in clay, I bumped into a problem where I needed to make a mold, and was introduced to a teacher that I had been unfamiliar with, not in a school, but in a private program, where he made molds and also had models posing. So in clay with long poses, I was able to do figurative work. And an evolution, ultimately, without, this long story made very short, I really always wanted to weld, but that's not something that was easily accessible in university. And by the time I was 50, that's when I got my first flavor of welding, my introduction.
Wow. And although I'm partial to all your pieces, whether it's three-dimensional or two-dimensional, there's something intrinsically exciting about your welding work, your pieces that involve gears and this and that. We'll get into those in a couple of minutes. You sent me, and this is also for the people listening to this as a podcast. We're a webcast, so thank goodness we have the visuals, and we're going to show in a few minutes your pieces. But because it's a podcast as well, we're going to get a little bit descriptive. And you've given me a list, 4 categories: rooted in sound, metal parts, figurative work, human figures, and the 4th one, clay figures and drawings evolving into steel silhouettes, which I really love as well. And we've got about 5 pictures we're going to run through. And I think it's fascinating, but that's just me. I'm also an artist. I think when we met, I was doing political cartoons for a couple of papers in Montreal, and some animation and all that sort of thing. So your 5 pictures that we've got, which we'll put up one at a time, it looks like a wide shot of a piano. Can you briefly speak to that? Because then we're going to do the tight shot of the piano with the hand.
Well, on a technical level first, rooted in sound is a 30-inch by 30-inch thin sheet of steel. That's the background. And in front of it, mounted on it, is a section of the keyboard from a piano that was rotting and ready to be thrown out. And on top of that I had done 2 hand castings of a 10-year-old girl, and the hands, as you can see, are covered with small little collage pieces of aged music sheet note paper. Intertwined are these vines that are also rods of steel that I've manually bent, and the floral elements that have been added, both with little pieces of metal, but even, as you will show at some point, that some of the floral elements are actually the hammers that were from the soft padded oval pieces that hit the string for music. So yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
So that's a technical description, first of all.
Mm-hmm. So
everything,
yeah.
The background, just to say, has been a patina has gone on it, which I pushed deliberately using vinegar, which kind of changes the finish of a metal, but some of the metal is rusted and mixed with acrylic paint. So this is the technical side of it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So exciting. 2 other pictures under this category of rooted in sound. It looks like metal and wire. And there's the 4th picture. It's a spring, which I don't know what fascinates me about springs, but can we talk briefly a little bit about those 2 photos, metal and wire one and the spring?
The spring element that's on the piano,
Exactly.
on the piano part, right?
Yeah.
I think my sense of humor pops up in my sculptures because of that, the bends and the movement, but also that little boing. And music is, clearly lyrical in sound, depending how you play. But I don't know. I think I just put the spring in as a goofy element, and I don't create that. That's a found object, and I think what's important in a big piece like this is not to have a look of sameness. That there's an ebb and flow, a push and pull. There's things underneath. There's things on top. The hands are caught underneath or covered, if you will, like by these floral elements, maybe almost like appearing like it's underground or under the leaves, in the woods, under the leaves, perhaps, where, what are these hands doing on this keyboard? Where is this from? And yeah, so the spring is kind of like, well, what is that doing there? Like, and what if the spring, clearly as vines do grow and they do these loopy things, time has passed and elements pop up, because that's what nature does. Things mushroom and develop. So that's
Absolutely.
a
Absolutely.
natural aspect to making a piece look not slick and tight.
Yeah.
It's got to be loose and rugged and from beneath. Yeah.
Yeah, not contrived in essence, perhaps. The second category is metal parts, and there are 7 pictures here. And what grabbed me right away, not simply because it was the first one, was one that has what appears to be scissors in the upper left-hand corner and a wrench in the lower left. And you probably know what I'm referring to. What's the story about that?
Well, first of all, I think tools have beautiful shapes. Like each one, somebody designed it. I mean, like a car, somebody designed it. They didn't just draw it. They had to build it in 3D. So this one element, I think, can be interesting on its own. What happens, of course, over time, if people discard them, it gets thrown in the basement, it got wet, it rusts, it breaks. People were rough with it. I like old tools because, well, new ones can be pretty as well, but they have stories. They've been used many times, maybe by many people. I don't know. I'm definitely attracted to these things because my father was a person who fixed things, made things, built things. And we had a home, a summer home that we used on weekends and part of the summer. Well, the dock down by the water needed some repairs, or the canoe needed some fixing, or you had to, uh, always repair something. And so, what do you repair? Anything that breaks or needs, improvement, you need a box of tools. So they were always just lying around, the same like cutlery would be in a kitchen. They're your utensils, but of purpose. And I think, so what happens is I find these objects. I mean, I come across them in farm sales or garage sales. I like to, people, tell me, I don't need this. My grandparents died and there's a bunch of tools in the basement. Do you want them? I'm like, yes. And I don't care, how damaged they are. In fact, they're more interesting if they are. That piece with all the parts put together is almost like a collage of the relationship between the parts and how, they're not, shears are not being used as shears. They're being kind of honored for their shape, and yet they're relating to other parts as well, which can make a story.
Absolutely. So exciting. Is it fair to say the same thing goes for another piece? It looks like there's tweezers in the center and a chisel in the lower left. Again, tools. Exciting, tactile. I love tactile. And any comments about that?
So at this recording, yeah, I don't have the piece in front of me, but it's another section of the same part, right?
Yeah. So I love that. It's scrumptious to me. That's the only way I can describe it, because of its tactileness. And to me, it's multifaceted even within the one section. There's so much, it's like a story in a way. And then when you kind of go wide on the shot, even more is revealed. It's really, really cool. And again, there's always movements, even though they're stationary objects right now. It's almost like they're frozen in time. You could almost see them moving in another lifetime or in another presentation. I love that.
And it's really nice, though, if I may say, that when people look at pieces like this, many will immediately connect by saying, oh, I used to use that when I used to do such and such in our house, or my grandfather had one of those, or wow, they don't make them like that anymore, or the red color that's left. Oh yeah, now they're not red, they're, covered in black or something. Or yeah, what I wanted to say also, what I like about this grid-like Mondrian-like arrangement of tools is that in Montreal, back in the 70s and 80s, there was a store called Pascal's.
Oh, sure. I remember it.
It was a very big Canadian Tire, like hardware store, right? Yeah, you remember it?
Absolutely. It was actually in my neighborhood in Côte des Neiges. And one of my guitars came from there, came from Pascal. And so I've got this emotional attachment to the store.
And I don't know if you remember, but immediately when you walked through the first doors of that big store, in front of you, bigger than a doorway, was this arrangement of tools. They were painted black, I believe, but this is where my piece is reminiscent of that sculpture. Now, I don't know if they used it for like protection of, because it could be used almost like as a security gate, but you had to walk by it. And many people who are from Montreal who've seen my piece, they'll say, did you know about that sculpture in Pascal's? And I'm like, exactly. Now that store closed, I don't know, in the mid 80s or something, gone. But that sculpture remains in my mind. And this, by the way, the piece that you're looking at can be hung because it's got a red bar across the top. It's a chisel.
Yes.
That can be hung in numerous ways in a window frame. So what I imagine, or it could be in the middle of a room as a partition, but you want to see it from both sides because both the front and the back are interesting. So normally sculpture is in the round and there's, the 360 degrees. This one, it's not perfectly flat, but it needs to be seen. There's two halves to it. Because sometimes one tool may look even better on the other side, or the name is engraved in it. It tells you what company it came from. So I hope to make more of those. That's kind of a direction where, yeah, I'll push further. And if anybody has any tools they want to give me, they always need
Very
your
cool.
tools to help
Very
me.
cool. Here's something under the same category, another photo that you sent me. It almost looks two-tiered and it's almost surreal. And I refer to it as reality or not. And or the first thing that came to mind for me was yin yang, but instead of it being horizontal, it was vertical. I don't know if you know which one I'm referring to. If not, that's cool. We've got tons of other ones we can chat about. But for example, I saw two pieces like this. It looks like a person standing and they've got a shovel for a head. I love that. Um, uh, what's the story behind that?
That shovel is a darling little toy shovel that a friend who had a home in the same region of where our country house was, he played with that as a child. And when I happened to be visiting and we were talking about my art, he said, I have something that you might want, and I don't need it. I don't use it. And it's old, and it's a charming little piece. So he gave it to me. And I find what happens is something like that little shovel, it looks figurative. As you said, there's like this head form, but also where the handle is on the lower part, I'm like, it's a cavity, it's an opening. So it's very deliberately placed. That female little figure was just, a fun compilation of parts. I, sometimes one piece needs to take center stage. And I think in this one, that was the inspiration. Like sometimes just, yeah, one piece just needs a few little more parts to kind of push it beyond what it was. And now, here's where my figurative influence and the body and the human figure comes back into play, but in a metallic way, a whimsical way. Yeah, I like that one. It's fun. I mean, it's small. I know I didn't give you measurements, but it's just about 14 inches high.
Mhm.
And what's interesting is, again, when you turn it around, it's got the because shovels you scoop, especially if you're playing with one on the beach, you want to be able to dig into the wet sand. So it's got great form on both sides.
Ah,
Yeah.
love it. I love it. There's
Mhm.
and there's also another what appears to be a figure, another person perhaps, and there's two vices. I don't know if that's recognizable by other people, and I have it theoretically up on the screen right now. It's got vices for arms and maybe a gear head. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
What it's so cool. Tell me.
I don't know what part that head is, but what I love is that when I found it, it was bent. And when something has some wonky feature to it, uh, I keep that. Like that's how I found it. So therefore, it's telling me that's how it needs to stay. I kind of believe that some of the parts that I find, they don't have voices. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that they resonate with me. They sometimes I'll look at something and I immediately think, oh my, I have to use that in a particular way because I can see it. before I use it. In most cases, I have no idea what a piece will be. But anyways, yes, they are vices. You still find those vices in the store, from these little, 2, 3 inch ones to quite large. Those are great arm forms. And yeah, that piece, what I really like about the piece is the legs and the feet are, if flipped upside down, those come from a cobbler or shoemaker who,
Ah,
would be using the forms to be able to repair shoes on. So that matching set, which another sculpture later that you show, the feet become feet, but they become the feet of a figure, has nothing to do with shoe repair anymore.
very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. So we're coming to the next category, figurative work and human figure. And when we kind of reconnected some years ago, because we go back to the 70s and there was this gap where, we were busy with life and things took us everywhere. When we reconnected, I saw your female pieces. Many of them are female and pregnant and beautiful Mother Earth kind of pieces. This one in particular almost moves me. She's got her arms crossed and she's gazing down. I don't know if you
Mm.
know.
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm.
And there's another one, a torso just of a female torso. And then there's the pregnant female. There's those three. So did you want to share any stories or anything around those?
Well, um, so there were actually models posing for those, and there were a half a dozen of us in a class on working on stands that we would rotate every 15, 20 minutes. So you worked in the round, the models sat in the middle of the room. But what would happen for me each time that I would work on those sculptures is usually the models pose. I mean, generally it was interesting, but I would get bored with it. So the woman that is sitting, and she's made with a material called plaster and hydrostone. Her legs were in that position, her arms were in that position, but her head was straight up.
Ah,
And I just thought, well, what emotion would push the sculpture to be more intense? I want angst, or I guess an injection of drama in the
mhm.
piece, whether it's funny or serious. The thing that's happened that's interesting is that white piece was sitting outside in my garden for many years because I didn't have enough place in the home where I was living to put it. And she sat outside amongst the flowers, and I decided to leave it outdoors all 4 seasons, which of course in Montreal there's lots of snow. And
Yep.
over time, no, that's not true. I would bring it in the winter time because yeah, the piece I thought would fall apart, which it did weaken, but all the little embedded little dips and in her back and around the body, it's changed color, and it kind of it aged. It was outside for 20 years. It aged and it
Wow.
got worn down, and the water, every time it rained, I guess it was, a little splash became a bigger little indentation, and then it got bigger and it got bigger. I look at it now, it's indoors now. It looks like it was in the ocean floor. It looks like it's from hundreds of years ago. Some of my pieces, you don't have a lot of pictures of this, but they look like whalebone. And I really like the natural deterioration. Well, like us, not that I want to say we're deteriorating, but our bodies are changing and there's lines, and the element of time has worked our beings, the shells, our casing. Well, that's what's happened to the sculpture. And it's the natural elements that did it. It wasn't like my touching it that made a finish on the bronze patina that made it age.
Yes.
it's the natural elements. That's very cool. So,
It is cool.
you know, and yeah, but she worked hard, that girl. She sat there. I know it looks very sorrowful, and sometimes there's personal stories that go behind the pieces, which don't necessarily, that was not the initial motivation for what she appears to look like, but it really there's a lot of self-reflection going on in that one. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one can feel that on some level or another. It's very cool. Now we're going to switch to the last category. Clay figures and drawings evolve into steel silhouettes. And two of the pieces here, I have to say, and I'm sure you'll know which ones I'm referring to, they remind me, and people of age will remember Alfred Hitchcock, that old series, and his logo, which were a couple of simple lines outlining his face or profile of his face.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, two of these pieces remind me of that. And I was jealous when I first saw the logos. I was very young, and every time they rerun those shows, it's like, I wish I had the guts to simplify like that into a few simple lines. And one of them, to me, it looks like a mother holding a baby. It's so simple, but that's what I got right away of it. We'll show that now. And another one looks like a torso or a pregnant figure as well. And both of those have come up. And again, how do you do that?
How do I technically make the piece, or how do I come up with the linear element?
The linear element, because it's so, to me, it's graphic and it's there. There it is. It's almost like an illusion. A lot of magicians, we like to believe that we complete something. Like, you didn't actually see what's in my hand, and you believed I put it into this hand, and now it's gone. So a whole thing was created with minimalism, if you will. And so I believe the same is evident with these two pieces, because there's minimal lines, and yet, to me, the pictures are complete.
Yeah, and you're explaining my answer better than me. Thank you. No, it's good. Occasionally I will draw before I make something, and especially when you're studying art classes and fine art classes in school, you're invited to always draw, because drawing keeps your mind sharp and your eye sharp, which is basically what all the art is about. It's the visual perception. That's what you're talking about.
Yes.
The visual perception. That, do you have to draw the whole figure to make the figure look like a person? No. You can do well, I think what happens is sometimes I'll do almost like a storyboard and draw the figure. And then, not because I get tired of drawing the whole thing, but I'm like, I can say as much about that drawing, and now I can do it less. So let me remove some of the lines. Let me say the same thing with less. And you remove and you remove and you remove. And now you get down to this quick sweep. Like you said, the Alfred Hitchcock quick sweep of a line that you know who you're looking at, because it's not necessary to have a paragraph. You only needed 3 words to say the same thing. And I'm not somebody who says little, but it is beautiful to have something that represents a form, whether it's a pregnant woman or what you think looks like a child. It's suggested. You can, this is the mind can play a game with you, going, well, that could be something else. And does it matter? And let me just say, by the way, that those pieces, sometimes they're not necessarily all on stands. They can be hung on the wall, but there's little bars behind that are about 3 inches deep. That means the piece can be screwed into the wall with the little, with like an L bracket. Now the sculpture is away from the wall. It's not flush against the wall. If you shine a light on the sculpture, now you get a shadow. You get a drawing from the sculpture.
So cool.
That is very cool. If you project 2 lights on them at 2 different angles, and if you put the pieces near a corner, you can get 2 drawings in the corners, plus the sculpture. That's like, oh crap, now it's a 2D and a 3D piece.
Oh,
That's lighting is very important with sculpture, because you can play with its depth, and you've added more character to what looked like initially just a simple, you know, form,
yes.
shape. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. We're gonna skip through to when I saw this, and you're gonna think I'm off the wall, and maybe I am. Maybe I should hang myself back up on the wall as a
Me
sculpture. I don't
too.
know,
We
but
are off the wall. That's why we're friends,
I
Mike.
hope so. I hope so. So this reminded me, I believe it's called a Rorschach test. It looked like a butterfly opening its wings. It was a sketch, I think, and then it became a 3D piece. But then when it became a 3D piece, it reminded me of ribs, a rib cage, maybe. So what's going on with that?
Hmm. Um, I definitely like bones and the inners of the human figure. Um, the drawing was, and I remember doing a series of sketches where uh, just I was drawing the roundness of the rib cage, but and I really liked what the drawings looked like, but I thought it's not satisfying enough to me. I need to do this in metal. I was working with wire that's almost just as thick as a hanger, which is really nice because you can easily bend it and shape it. Um, put the drawing aside, put this long rod in the middle, which, ultimately, if you want to push the whole sculpture into the ground outdoors, it can stay outside. You push the rod down into the earth. And then, yeah, I just played with bending this hanger, echoing that, you're right, rib-like form. I can't tell you why I did it, but I definitely enjoyed the um, rawness of the human body again, but ignoring skin and detail and muscles and yeah, I don't know what else to say.
Yeah,
It's
it's all good. It's all good. It all makes sense
they're
on it.
skeletal. I think
Yes,
that well,
skeletal. Yeah.
it's or skeletal, yeah. Actually, and just, without going down that big heavy psychological path, it was at a point where I was definitely in a dark place emotionally. And when you do something so simple and raw, and you feel that way, it echoes in your art. And I think
Absolutely.
when I look at those pieces, which have never been on display or anything, I just know, ooh, I was going for the really basic brass tacks elementary side of things, if that explains that.
It sure does. Now, one of my favorite pictures, it's kind of a generic picture. It's a picture of you, and you're in a junkyard or a scrapyard with a couple of vehicles, junked vehicles, which in them, which to me is art as well. Like
They
they look,
are.
they're scrumptious again, and there you are. Kind of in the middle of it, kind of sitting there, and they'll see that in a few seconds. And what I love about it is a duality. But do you have any comments about that?
um Well, first of all, I was in Jerome, the town of Jerome, which is in Arizona, not far, well, sort of, maybe another hour and a half away from the Grand Canyon. And I went to visit this place, which was like, they called it a ghost town. So there was metal all over the place. And those old trucks, I love them. I was like, can I drive one of those? So I was just so drawn to have to stand there. And I ended up purchasing, can you imagine going on the airplane with that like saw blade, which of course I could find in Montreal, but I just needed my souvenir from there. Um, I love those old cars. They're classics. And there they are, just rusting, doing their thing, time, ripping them apart slowly. But yeah, I was thrilled. I just felt so at home.
Absolutely.
No
Absolutely.
Teslas for me.
Yes, I just love that. And I love the contrast between human and machine and all that. And yet there's
You're
a
right.
humanity. Some people might think I'm mad by saying this, but you'll get it, of course. There's a humanity about the trucks, about the vehicles, about the inanimate objects there. The Japanese believe that everything has a soul as well. And so I kind of do, but not in a new agey kind of way, but more in a humanistic kind of way. So it looks like we're coming to the end, and I want everyone to check out your website. I want everyone to check out, because we only covered a small amount of your pieces of your work. How can people reach you?
Well, they can go to my website, which is my full name, Mona Rutenberg, one word, .ca. And feel free to ask me questions. And, I think you can also look me up on Facebook under Mona Rutenberg, sculptor. Um, yeah, if I can just add a quickie comment too, which is I like the conversation that we had when we had a preamble before this podcast, and you talked about the guts of something. Uh, for whatever we were referring to in general, or specifically, I can't remember, but I do want to say that whether it's the interior of something, whether it's a historical reflection of things that once was, I think you know you do all this work with illusion and imagination. I'm also interested in take a look at what you see, but realize there's a lot more going on, because this is a timepiece. These things have had their purpose and they were discarded, considered not useful anymore, garbage. But no, they shouldn't be forgotten. They have functions. So bring them back out and, recycle, yes, but bring them back out so that what was can still be, but transform it. That's my, illusion of what I'm trying to create, I think, to bring it back to life and make it joyful, positive, fun.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I
Mhm.
want to thank you once again, Mona. It's Mona Rutenberg, artist, for joining us this day. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
A-
Fabulous.
And thanks to all of you out there who joined us. We'll see you all really soon.